In the previous episode of my discussion with SRK's Chris O'Brien, we spoke about the need for mining companies to strategize on how to get to net zero scope 1 and 2 quicker than they are probably currently aiming for. Chris, aside from the pressure that they're getting from investors, what are the other incentives, if any, for mining companies to address their emissions?
Well, I suppose mining, a lot of mining commodities are in a bit of an enviable position in that their stuff, their commodities are going to be essential for the green transition. So you can't build a wind turbine without steel and copper and neodymium. You can't store a lot of the energy that comes from renewables without lithium or even potentially hydrogen, which needs platinum and palladium to produce it. So it's not all doom and gloom. There are, the mining industry is going to be required for the green transition for many, many years to come. We have the World Resources Institute, which is the body that created the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, has done a lot of research on whether or not we can achieve, the goals that are set out in the Paris Agreement, whether we can, constrain global warming to where it needs to be. And all that analysis has been based on the assumption that the minerals and the materials needed to build the renewable infrastructure is going to be available, and the only bottleneck is finance. And what we do know in the mining industry is that between discovering a new resource or a new deposit and extracting it, it can be decades. So really, the pressure is on us as the mining industry to try to do what we can to accelerate that process, to get these critical minerals out of the ground and into the infrastructure that we need.
So you mentioned the lead up time to actually develop a project. What would you have anything to say about project developers specifically, as opposed to producers? I would imagine that project developers would be even better placed, I think, to design their operations around targeting lower emissions.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing that we always say with ESG and SRK. It's that the biggest opportunity that you have to decarbonize, to make an impact on any ESG, social as well in particular, is before a shovel goes in the ground. Before you start digging anything, if you're still in the process of designing a mine, or your early or late exploration, you have a lot of influence over what that mine will look like. And just things, for example, if you have an open pit, or if you need to develop an open pit mine, think electrification, think using renewables, and what that will do is sort of guide you in the direction of what can we use, electric vehicles to move this material. If that's not necessarily economically feasible, then you can add pantograph assist, so the trolley assist, where you've got just like cable cars. But in order to install trolley assist, you need long straight runs of road. So that comes down to how you design the pit itself, to make sure that you have these long gradual roads that you can put cables on to enable. And when these trolley assist operations are installed, the trucks run faster, when they're climbing up the hill than regular diesel. So it does add operational improvements, but you need to be thinking about that stuff early on. So what we tend to say to our PFS level and PEA clients is try and think electrification first, then renewables first, and if for any reason those two aren't economical, then you can start sort of moving towards the more conventional stuff. But really, if you don't rule those out, then it's going to be a bit of a sticky situation, because ultimately, my personal opinion is that all new mines should be looking to be net zero or carbon neutral from day one, really. And in order to do that, mining engineers and project developers need to look at that early on.
So they would be looking at electrification, just to clarify, electrification together with renewables, supported by and powered by renewables, to the extent that that's possible. Is that right?
Yeah, well, the Mining Journal produced the Future Fleet report in I think early on in this year. And one thing from reading that came through to me is that there is an electric solution for pretty much every mining vehicle, but currently there is an extra expense to those. But the more people buy those trucks, the more they invest in those pieces of machinery, the cheaper they're going to become going forward. And ultimately, from observing the market trends, I don't think it's going to be long before investors expect that all new mines should be carbon neutral. We've already seen some in Canada. There's a few in Norway that are looking to be carbon neutral. And these are, these do benefit from a high renewables content in that national grid, so they can just use energy from the national infrastructure, and that will be fairly low carbon. But if you look at across sub-Saharan Africa, there's huge solar potential. You've just got to think early on about putting that infrastructure in, before while you're developing your mine.